My name is Swapnil, and I will be talking about network security monitoring in the context of enterprise networks and why it matters. I will also show how you can implement network security monitoring in your home network. A little bit about me. I am the network security plumber and CEO at Shrestha IT. We have been working in the network security and threat intelligence space. I also love teaching InfoSec topics, and I'm an APNIC community trainer as well. So let me start off by saying that in the context of security, the general notion is prevention is preferred over detection. But I hope that all of you will agree with me that total prevention is a logical fallacy, because prevention is limited to the knowledge of known threats. From a detection perspective, if we were to look at that one metric which talks about state of a security program at an enterprise, it would be attack dwell time. So what is dwell time? It's basically the time between compromise and detection. And a recent survey by SANS Institute indicates that the time between initial compromise and detection is somewhere between 1 to 6 months. The folks behind the RSA conference had a very interesting article recently. Why attacker dwell time is the only metric that really matters. And the author made the case, imagine finding out one day that there was someone living in the basement of your house, and while you were at work, they spent the day casually snooping around. That's a frightening thought, right? Now imagine that this violation persisted day in and day out for months or even years. Now that's truly terrifying. The Verizon data breach investigation report also talks about attack dwell time, and I highly recommend that you check the report out. The enterprise security landscape becomes hazy if we take into account the security 1% idea. Richard, or Tao Security, as he is popularly known as, says that security 1% is the assortment of people and organizations who have the personnel, processes, technology, and support to implement somewhat robust digital security programs, especially those with detection and response capabilities, and not just planning and resistance or prevention functions. So let me start off with a couple of examples in this context. So sometime in 2014, Sony got hacked. For anyone who doesn't know about the hack, in short, a group of attackers who identified themselves as guardians of peace compromised Sony's network and leaked confidential information. The attack dwell time was roughly a year. This is FireEye. Sometime in mid-December 2020, FireEye shared that they were breached due to a supply chain attack on SolarWinds by what they called the Sunburst malware. Recent findings by SolarWinds says that they have found evidence that the reconnaissance and suspicious activity started sometime in January 2019. So the attack dwell time was again roughly a year. Sometime in January 2021, Volexity, the incident response company, detected data exfiltration activity from two of its customers, which they identified using network security monitoring. Microsoft made an emergency patch available sometime on 2nd March 2021 to plug the server-side request forgery vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange. Now, if you're interested in the technical details, I would highly recommend Stephen Adair's keynote, An Unauthorized Exchange, at the 33rd First Conference, which happened sometime last week. Before I start talking about network security monitoring, I think it's important to take into account the security in layers approach. One can use the MITRE ATT&CK matrix for enterprise, which is a framework which lists out adversary tactics and techniques based on real-world observations. So evaluating the attack matrix and mapping out detection and prevention strategies to counter the various stages of an attack. In that context, I've listed out a few, namely segmentation of a network, DNS response policy zones, least privileges on the host, and canary tokens. Huge props to Things Canary for canaries and canary tokens. They raise the detection game to another level. If you haven't checked them out, please do so. While network security monitoring is important, let me unpack what is network security monitoring. It's basically the collection, detection, and analysis of network security data. So network security monitoring enables visibility into the network and provides the computer incident response teams an opportunity to detect and respond to intrusions. So for example, if a ransomware gets into a network, one of the early signs of that you will see in the network is in the network security monitoring context is lateral movement, because malware doing reconnaissance by scanning something like SMB shares. So network security monitoring isn't about preventing intrusions. It's all about detecting intrusions at a very early stage and responding to them. So I'll quickly go through the various stages or components in order to implement network security monitoring in an enterprise network. In general, if implementing in the context of a cloud environment, the principles will remain the same. From a hardware perspective, a managed switch is required in order to mirror packets as seen on the network to the sensor. Alternative to a managed switch is a tap device, which can also be used. I won't be going into the details of which is better or the pros and cons of them, as that's a totally different discussion altogether. The sensor is basically could be a server, it could be a simple system which will ingest all network traffic mirrored from other ports in the network. So from a context of a home or a Soho network, the sensor can be a Raspberry Pi or even an Intel NUC. On the software front, there are many proprietary on-premise as well as cloud options, but there are also excellent open source alternatives, namely Zeek, which was previously known as Bro, Suricata, and Security Onion. So what is Zeek? Zeek is a passive network analyzer. If you give Zeek network traffic or even PCAPs, that is already captured traffic, Zeek will generate high fidelity logs describing network activity. Some of the detection capabilities of Zeek are identifying SSH brute force in the network, extracting files from, say, HTTP sessions. Aside from the security angle, Zeek is also used for measuring and troubleshooting network performance. Suricata is an intrusion detection system. It's also an inline intrusion prevention system. So it does deep packet inspection and pattern matching. Some of the notable features of Suricata is that it's port agnostic and multi-threaded amongst many. Security Onion is a Linux distribution primarily for threat hunting, as well as enterprise security monitoring and log management as well. So it includes Suricata, Zeek, ElkStack, and many other tools. Now, enterprise network architectures can be fairly complex, and network security monitoring will be dependent on multiple factors, such as placement of the sensor, what are the most important assets to monitor. But here is a representation of a simple flat network, and you can see a managed switch, which is having a span port, which mirrors packets from a specific port or all ports to the network security monitoring sensor, which is the NSM sensor. So in this case, in the image representation, the NSM sensor is a Raspberry Pi. All right, so let me go ahead and see if the demo gods are with me today. All right, so I am assuming that all of you are able to see the terminal screen. So what I have here is basically Security Onion installed on a VM in the network, and I have logged into it via SSH. And I have a couple of PCAPs. So I'm not going to run through live traffic analysis of live traffic and doing threat hunting and trying to find badness, because that might take more time. Instead, what I've done is I have taken a couple of PCAPs, which has already captured the network traffic. And I'm going to run through those and show you a couple of examples in which how this can work. So in this specific context, in order to import PCAP into into security onion, the way you do that is using a tool called as so-import-pcap, and then you give the pcap as an option. So when you do that, what it will try to do is it will run the pcap through Suricata as well as Zeek and analyze the network traffic. And once it has done that, it will give us a link. It will give us a URL which we can use to access in the browser and do threat hunting. So let's wait for a couple of more seconds by the time it completes, and then go ahead and see what it can uncover. There you go. So here is the URL. I am hoping I have to share the screen. I'm hoping you're able to see the browser as well. And once we access this specific link, the URL, we can see that this is Suricata. So we have imported the PCAP, and we can do some threat hunting. So we can see what the PCAP is all about. So in this case, the PCAP is actually from an enterprise network. But having said that, I have carved out certain information out of the PCAP, and ignoring all the sensitive information that there could have been. And here we are. So when we look at this, we can see that there is some amount of visibility that we are already able to gain, where Suricata is basically telling us certain alerts. So these are basically, this is the alerts menu, or these are the events where there are certain events which Suricata is terming as probably malicious, probably potential bad traffic, as you can see here. And this is basically coming from the ET rules, the emerging threat rules, which are built into Suricata. So we can, if I scroll down a bit, I'm sure we can find out. Yeah, that's the rule reference. So Suricata, comes with, in the case of the security onion VM that I have here, comes with the emerging threat rules, the community rules. But you can also write your own rules as well, and find badness in your network. Now, let's go ahead and try to find out potentially badness here. So if I go to access Kibana and possibly change the timeline. So this is not live traffic. So we'll have to change the timeline to, let's say, last 1 year. And immediately we are able to see, categorization or classification of traffic based on protocol. So as we can see that DNS is hitting at the top with regards to the amount of traffic that it has generated. So if I access DNS, it will again, zone down to only the DNS context, especially considering that I'll have to change the element to from having the timeline to last 1 year, because this is a PCAP which was already captured traffic. Now, having said that, we are able to now see classification of DNS traffic based on IP address. And here are a couple of notable elements. One is at the very top, we are able to see there is an IP address 10.205.37.2, which is actually a recursive resolver in the network. So that's actually a recursive resolver in the network. So that's understandable that the recursive resolver is making a lot of queries for all the clients which are using it as the DNS. But there is the second IP, which is kind of interesting, because that's a client system in the network, which we know about. And that has made probably around 47,000 plus DNS queries. And that's probably an anomaly, considering that, if you're looking at traffic day in, day out, you will basically be able to identify what is normal traffic, what is good traffic, and what is probably an anomaly. So in this context, this certainly looks like an anomaly. So let's go ahead and look at all DNS traffic from this specific host. Let me change the timeline. I'm sorry. Last 1 year. And there we go. And if we scroll a little below, we are now able to see each and every event, each and every DNS query and response that we can kind of drill down into. So if I say, for example, if I look at one of the examples here, let's take the other one. Live threat hunting is always potentially a challenge. And we can see that this specific host, 10.205.69.171, made a DNS query to m8. Some DNS, some domain name, which potentially could be malicious. And let us look at a few more. This is probably the response side of things. Let me take this one. And here is one more. And if I look at this again, this probably is the same. Probably it made a DNS query to the same domain name. And here is that one again. Let us see if I can find more. Hopefully we should be able to find, yeah, here is one more, m3.dxz. So this is suspicious. This is an anomaly, primarily because those domain names look like DGA domains, right? Domain generated algorithms where malware basically, to prevent threat analysts from identifying their domains, will use DGA domains, which are basically domains which are generated on the fly. So instead of the malware communicating with only a few domains, the malware will communicate with the on-the-fly generated domains, making it much more harder for threat analysts to kind of pinpoint and blacklist or flag those domains and take them down. So this is one of the examples where this is certainly looks suspicious, 47,000 plus. And if you go in detail, we'll see that all these are primarily for the fact that I know that I've already investigated this. But if you drill down into each of those events, we can see that each of those DNS queries are to DGA domains. And this is how network security monitoring potentially can uncover a lot of badness as well. I'll take one more example here. Let me go back to the terminal, and I have one more PCAP. So let's go ahead and import that. So import PCAP. Hat tip to Brad Duncan from Malware Traffic Analysis for all the work that he does and puts all these PCAPs online for anyone to download and look at. This is all potentially malicious traffic, especially different malware in it, and then you can basically use it to investigate and find out what those specific malware are doing. So if we run this again, what this tool so-import-pcap is going to do is going to take that PCAP, run it through Suricata as well as Zeek, and then generate a unique URL, which we can take and do sort of threat hunting with regards to what is happening there. And by the time you get this will also be dependent, obviously, based on the size of the PCAP. So these PCAPs are smaller in size. So these are very something that you'll get access to the URL very quickly. Certain times it takes up to 30 seconds for content to show up on the dashboard here. So if you look at this traffic, the alerts which Suricata and Zeek have both generated. Again, we are getting certain potential use case of visibility where it is sharing that it is probably a malware known as Dridex based on the JA3 hash. And what is JA3? JA3 as well as JA3S is basically TLS fingerprinting. Salesforce, the company behind it, made this open source, and it's an excellent way to kind of fingerprint TLS connections and make possible inference with regards to what this is based on the client as well as on the server end as well. So go check that out as well. So if we drill down into this, say for example, we want to look at threat hunting on this specific PCAP. Let me again change the timeline to 1 year. And again, we are able to see that it's producing. But let's go ahead and look at using the Zeek module to try to do threat hunting here and try to get some sort of understanding whether this traffic is malicious or not. Change the timeline. There you go. And if we wait for a couple of seconds, I think we can see this is probably the earlier one. Right. And we have, in looking at another context, looking at in another way, we are also able to see now from a threat hunting perspective that there is some amount of traffic which is hitting port 8080. Now that is suspicious, because in an enterprise network, you would ideally have traffic probably going to 80 or 443, which is again could be that there is a lot of suspicious element to it which one needs to investigate. But if there is traffic that is certainly going to 8080 and it's not belonging to the enterprise, where it's not an endpoint to the enterprise, then that certainly is could be an anomaly, and that is something that we can investigate. Let me try and doing that again. There you go. Change it to 1 year. And now we are able to see that there is a system in the network 10.2.8.101, which made a connection to 198.211.10.238, and exchange certain amount of traffic. So there is something that happened here. So this is in a very simple and basic way how network security monitoring can again give you visibility in order to do threat hunting as well as drill down into what is happening in your network. Moving on, so Security Onion is definitely awesome, but it does have some steep hardware requirements, especially if you want to implement a network security monitoring in a home or a Soho kind of setup and play around with it. So if you do not have the compute to install Security Onion, go check out a recent blog post of mine where I've documented how to implement a network security monitoring at home using a Raspberry Pi. If you don't have a span or a tap, no problem. Let's bend the rules a bit. This method is totally okay if you're in a home network and if you do not have demanding users, but it's totally not okay if you're going to do this in a production network. Please be careful. You will get fired if you do this in a production network. So here is the thing. So what if we fool the entire network to send all its traffic to our sensor, which is the Raspberry Pi, in the context of the image network image that I showed earlier, instead of the default gateway, which is ideally going to be a router in most cases? Well, you can do that by sending spoofed ARP queries to the network pretending to be the default gateway. And how you do this, you can go ahead and explore the tool BetterCap, which has a module for ARP spoofing. Here are resources with links that I've mentioned, as well as references for books as well in the context of network security monitoring. This is my contact information. And with that, if anyone has any questions, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
So the first question is from Samir Kilker, and he asks, how relevant is DNS over HTTPS? Because of privacy reasons, I think the trend is moving to encrypting DNS now. In such a case, what can be done to detect malware?
Right. That's an excellent question. And that had me, I have been up at night with that specific question. So in the context of DOH, I would recommend that you look at JAR3 as well as JAR3S, the way of fingerprinting TLS. That is one way to typically identify, SSL, communication happening from within the network to an endpoint per se.
The next question is from Sridhar Sharma. He says, how can we take care of storage and compute requirements in enterprise network?
That's a very broad question per se. I think this will be very subjective and dependent on the size of the network as well as what kind of traffic you are generating. But another thing which you could potentially explore is an open source software called as it was previously known as Moloch, where you can save PCAPs in a very efficient manner and potentially use those PCAPs to infuse into network security monitoring. Maybe that could be one option where storage is primarily a criteria.
Okay, the third question is from Saeed Akhtar. He says, how do you implement this in the context of AWS, where you may have a lot of dynamic nodes? What's the typical cycle time from intrusion actively happening to the time the tools actually detect it?
In the context of AWS, I think the same principles would apply. Of course, having said that, you would, Suricata in the context of, let's say, Suricata or Security Onion, which I talked about in the talk, is something that is also available as a provision in the marketplace, which can be implemented. So you could look at that and look at VPC port mirroring to mirror traffic into that specific node. The typical life cycle time from an intrusion actively happening to the time the tools actually detect it, I think this is dependent on the computer security incident response teams that you have, which are primarily looking at this from a detection perspective. So ideal goal, as I mentioned earlier, or the whole point of the talk is not the prevention angle, but the detection angle. So it is all going to be dependent on finding the needle in the haystack. I think
Giridhar asks, DNS logging is expensive. How do we manage such a case in enterprise? Best approach?
I don't think there is any specific approach which one can do in the context of DNS logging. But instead of doing DNS logging, if you're able to log the packets, I think that could be one efficient way where you could infuse those packets, ingest them into something like, let's say, even Zeek, and that produces high fidelity logs, which can then nail down into anomalies which can potentially be arising from the network.
I have a couple for you. Somewhere around 2018, when Alex Demos used to run Facebook, he actually joked that in order to monitor a data center, I need another data center. Because that is the only way in which I can figure out what is going on, because things have gone pretty crazy out there. So do you see similar problems for companies that are running 50,000, 70,000 servers in AWS?
Absolutely. But having said that, I think the constraints of doing this at scale are always going to be there, right? But having said that, I think there is probably a different approach where you could just look at the crown jewels, right? If not everything in the landscape. Maybe that is another approach to do it. Like as an example, we rolled this out recently, a couple of weeks ago. We rolled this out for an enterprise network having 5,000 systems in the network, and potentially speaking, with the hardware that we had available, looking at so it's not just north-south traffic, that is internet originating from within the LAN to the internet, but also east-west traffic, right? Because that is what gives you also visibility when you're looking at, let's say, if there is ransomware or if there is any system which is trying to communicate move laterally, right? That is very early signs to look at. Now, having said that, we couldn't do this for looking at the east-west traffic as well, but at least we have implemented some sort of visibility where it is giving us understanding of what is happening from within the network to the internet, right? So maybe there could be multiple approaches that can be had there.
Okay. The next question is also on DOH. Do you actually suggest banning DOH in your network?
That's
because that is one of the hard ones.
That's a very loaded question. So I'm kind of split from a privacy perspective. DOH is great, completely, on board with regards to what is DOH and what is the entire motive behind it. Not so much on the centralization perspective, because the way it has been rolled out is everything is getting centralized to certain cloud providers, cloud DNS providers. On the enterprise scale, I echo Dr. Paul Vixie's thoughts: my network, my rules. So yes, in the context of my network, at the DNS layer, we have been blocking DOH by blocking the canary domain, which primarily is used by many of the cloud DNS providers.
Okay, Adarsh Mehrotra asks, in the first example that you took, what are the next steps to be taken as you diagnose that the traffic is coming from malware?
Right. So in the context of the first example, I think that was the anomaly with the large number of influx of DNS queries from a specific host in the network. So immediately after identifying that, what we did was we identified that specific host in the network and disconnected it primarily to look at what was specifically running. And here is an interesting thing. I actually tweeted about this some time back, I think in the last couple of weeks, where the thing that actually saved the enterprise, in my opinion, although I'm still not clear on that, is the fact that all those DGA domains were already sinkholed. So those domains were sinkholed by, so domain name registries, what they will do is, once the threat intelligence community points out domains which are being used for malware, they will sinkhole those domains by routing them to something like localhost or RFC 1918 IP address, which is traditionally not seen these days, but usually localhost. So we identified that and we reached out to the domain name registry, which is VeriSign in this case, and asking them what exactly malware strain was actually using these domains. Still not clear on that context yet. They are still looking at it, and the ticket has been escalated. But this is a very recent case, which there are a lot of unknowns at this point of time. So we still don't know which malware was trying to do this. That is still an unknown at this point of time.
Riaz Walikar asks, as an attacker, if I use well-known domains /services like Twitter, for example, as a CNC intermediary, would it fly under the radar for monitoring setup like the one that you described?
Yes, that is definitely something that will probably be difficult to identify. But having said that, there are other layers which you can fall back into by looking at the nature of the communication. If there is, let's say, an anomaly where large number of packets are originating from within the network to that specific endpoint, by that specific domain, then one can drill down into the PCAPs. One can drill down into what sort of communication actually happened at that point of time. And that is certainly difficult, but is possible. And because of the visibility.